17 species had already died. Their names existed only in hegemony records now, listed under a single cold word. Corrected. Ambassador Priya Nair knew this as she stood in the converted aircraft hangar in Geneva. The space had been transformed overnight into a diplomatic chamber. Cables ran across the concrete floor. Technicians whispered into headsets. Armed soldiers lined the walls, their weapons useless against what was coming. 3 columns of light appeared in the center of the room. The holograms took shape slowly. The first was a crystalline being, its body made of what looked like frozen lightning. The second resembled a floating mass of tentacles wrapped around a glowing core. The third was tall and thin, with skin like polished metal and eyes that held no warmth. Overseer Dralith, the crystalline one, spoke first. His voice sounded like glass breaking in slow motion. Species designation, human. Planet designation, Earth. You have been cataloged. Priya stepped forward. She had negotiated peace deals between nations that hated each other for centuries. She had talked warlords into releasing hostages. Nothing had prepared her for this. Cataloged for what purpose? She asked. Resource viability, Dralith answered. Your world meets hegemony standards. Per the Galactic Accord, all newly discovered civilizations must contribute to the collective prosperity. 30% of planetary output. Annually. In perpetuity. Murmurs spread through the chamber. 30%. Every year. Forever. And if we refuse? Priya kept her voice steady. The tentacled being shifted. The metallic one made a sound that might have been laughter. Dralith's crystalline form flickered. 17 species have required correction in the last galactic cycle. Their worlds now serve the hegemony directly. Their populations no longer exist to complicate matters. Priya felt her stomach drop. She had suspected this, but hearing it confirmed was different. These beings had wiped out entire civilizations. Not conquered. Erased. You have one lunar cycle to formalize your acceptance, Dralith continued. A tribute fleet will arrive to collect the first payment. Resistance is not advised. Compliance is not optional. The holograms vanished. Chaos erupted immediately. World leaders shouted at each other. Military advisors demanded action. Scientists called for calm analysis. Priya stood motionless in the center of it all, her mind racing through possibilities that all ended the same way. A hand touched her elbow. General Amara Okonkwo, head of the Planetary Defense Initiative, guided her away from the crowd. We need to talk, Amara said quietly. Somewhere private. They found an empty office down the hall. Amara closed the door and activated a signal jammer. There's something you need to see. Amara pulled out a tablet and handed it to Priya. Our orbital telescopes picked this up 3 days ago. We kept it classified. The screen showed a star map. A cluster of red dots sat 2 systems away from Earth. The label read, Unidentified Fleet. Estimated count, 800 vessels. They sent the correction fleet before they even delivered the ultimatum, Priya said. They expected us to say yes. Everyone says yes. Amara's jaw tightened. This isn't a negotiation. It's a formality. They're going to take our planet whether we agree or not. The tribute is just slavery with extra steps. Priya stared at the red dots. 800 warships. Earth had nothing that could match that. Their space program was barely capable of reaching Mars. Their weapons were designed to fight each other, not alien armadas. What are our options? She asked. Honestly, we have 2. Accept tribute and hope they don't decide to correct us anyway. Or refuse and definitely get corrected. Amara paused. Unless we find a third option. What third option? I don't know yet. But I know this. Every species before us accepted because they thought refusing meant certain death. Maybe it does. But accepting means certain slavery. At least if we fight, we die free. Priya thought about her daughter in Mumbai. Her elderly parents in Kerala. The 8 billion people on this planet who had no idea their existence now hung by a thread. She thought about the 17 species who had chosen peace and found extinction instead. Give me the Joint Chiefs, she said. All of them. Every nation. I don't care about politics or treaties or old grudges. We have 1 month to do something no one in this galaxy has ever done. What's that? Survive. Priya walked toward the door. And then make them regret ever finding us. The assembly was still arguing when she returned. Diplomats blamed militaries. Militaries blamed scientists. Everyone blamed everyone else for humanity's sudden vulnerability. Priya climbed onto the central platform. She did not ask for silence. She simply stood there until the noise faded. They have given us a choice, she said. Slavery or extinction. They expect us to pick slavery because we're afraid of extinction. They expect us to kneel because every other species has knelt. She looked around the room at the leaders of Earth. Enemies who would need to become allies. Rivals who would need to become family. I say we give them a third option, one they never considered. And what option is that? Someone called out. Priya smiled, though there was no warmth in it. War. The crash probe had sat in a Cairo warehouse for 47 years. Governments had changed. Wars had been fought. Generations had grown old. And still, the strange object from beyond the stars remained a secret known only to a handful of scientists. Dr. Yusuf Abbasi had spent his entire career studying it. Now he had 20 days to turn decades of careful research into a weapon. The communication array is the key, he told his team as they worked through another sleepless night. Their ships talk to each other constantly. If we can disrupt that signal, even locally, we blind them. His assistant, a young physicist named Fatima, looked up from her calculations. We can build a disruptor, but it will only work within a limited range. Maybe a few thousand kilometers. Then we build 100 of them. 1,000. Yusuf stared at the alien circuitry spread across his workbench. They think we're primitive. Let's use that. Across the world, humanity was changing. In Brussels, General Amara Okonkwo stood before a room full of military commanders who had spent their careers planning to fight each other. American admirals sat next to Russian generals. Chinese air marshals shared tables with their European counterparts. Old enemies forced to become new allies. We have 3 weeks, Amara said. 3 weeks to build a unified command structure. 3 weeks to combine our forces into something that can face an alien armada. I won't pretend this will be easy. I won't pretend we'll win. But I will tell you this. If we fail because we couldn't put aside our differences, then we deserve whatever they do to us. The room was silent. Then the Russian general stood. My submarines are at your command, General. One by one, the others followed. American carriers, Chinese space assets, European missile systems, Indian cyber units. For the first time in human history, the entire military might of Earth answered to a single authority. But Priya knew that military force alone would not save them. She needed allies. Real ones. And she had an idea where to find them. Through back channels and encrypted signals, she reached out to the Baravi, a species of insectoid traders who operated throughout hegemony space. They were small. They were weak. And they had been paying tribute for over 200 cycles. The Baravi representative appeared on her screen as a creature with 6 limbs and compound eyes that reflected light like broken mirrors. You are either very brave or very foolish, the Baravi said. No species has ever refused tribute. Which is exactly why we're going to, Priya replied. Tell me something. In 400 cycles, has the hegemony ever actually fought a war? The Baravi's antennae twitched. They correct. They do not fight. Because no one has ever fought back. Priya leaned forward. What happens when someone does? You will die. Maybe. But what if we don't? What if we hurt them badly enough that they have to think twice? What message does that send to every tribute species watching? The Baravi was silent for a long moment. You are asking us to risk everything on a species we have never met. A species that has never traveled beyond its own star. I'm asking you to hope, Priya said. When was the last time any tribute species was allowed to do that? The connection ended. Priya did not know if she had succeeded or failed. She would find out soon enough. The days blurred together. Factories that once built cars now built missiles. Space agencies launched satellites equipped with Yusuf's disruptors. Underground bunkers were expanded to shelter billions if the surface became unlivable. Humanity had never worked together like this. Nations that had been enemies for centuries now shared resources without question. Scientists who had competed for funding now collaborated openly. Soldiers who had trained to kill each other now trained to defend their species. Fear united them. But something else kept them going. Pride. Stubbornness. The simple human refusal to accept an impossible situation that on the final day of the lunar cycle, Priya stood in the same Geneva chamber where it had all begun. The holographic projectors hummed to life. Overseer Dralith appeared once more, his crystalline form casting strange light across the walls. The cycle has ended, Dralith said. You will now formalize your submission to the hegemony. Priya looked at the alien being. Behind her stood representatives from every nation on Earth, generals and scientists, leaders and common people, all watching, all waiting. Humanity has considered your offer, she said. It was not an offer. It was a requirement. We've decided to decline. Priya smiled. But we do have a message for you. She pressed a button. Across every frequency the hegemony used, a single word broadcast in every alien language their linguists had been able to translate. No. Dralitha's form flickered. For just a moment, Priya thought she saw something like surprise in those cold, crystalline eyes. You choose correction, he said. We choose war. Priya stepped closer to the hologram. Come and take your tribute, Overseer. We'll be waiting. The hologram vanished. Outside, the first alarms began to sound. They came out of the darkness between stars like a swarm of silver locusts. 600 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their hulls gleamed with technologies that human scientists could barely understand. Their weapons could crack continents. Their shields could shrug off nuclear fire. Commander Hiroshi Tanaka watched them approach from the bridge of the Unity, humanity's flagship. The Unity had been a cargo freighter 6 months ago. Now it bristled with missiles and carried the hopes of a species. All units, hold formation, he said into the fleet channel. Do not engage until my signal. Around him floated the rest of humanity's defense force. Retrofitted civilian vessels. Converted satellites. Anything that could carry a weapon and survive in space. 300 ships against 600. The math was simple. The math was death. But Hiroshi had never been good at math. The hegemony fleet spread across the void like a net, ready to catch Earth and squeeze. Their formation was perfect. Their movements were synchronized. They operated as a single organism, each ship knowing exactly where the others were and what they were doing. That was their strength. Hiroshi intended to make it their weakness. Dr. Abasi, he said, is your surprise ready? Yusuf's voice came through from the surface. Ready, Commander. On your signal. Hiroshi waited. The hegemony ships moved closer. 50,000 kilometers. 40,000. 30. Now. Across the void, hidden satellites activated. Yusuf's communication disruptors sent out waves of interference that crashed into the hegemony network like stones thrown into a spider's web. The perfect formation shattered. Ships that had moved as one suddenly drifted apart. Weapons that had been coordinated now fired blindly. The hegemony fleet became 600 individual vessels, each one cut off from the others. All units, engage, Hiroshi ordered. The human fleet surged forward. They couldn't match the aliens in firepower. They couldn't match them in shields or speed or technology. But they could do something the hegemony had forgotten how to do. Improvise. Wolf packs of small ships swarmed individual hegemony vessels, attacking from angles their automated defenses couldn't track. Nuclear missiles detonated in precise patterns, creating electromagnetic storms that blinded alien sensors. Suicide drones packed with radioactive waste slammed into carrier bays, contaminating them and forcing evacuations on the bridge of his command ship. Overseer Dralith watched his fleet fall into chaos. He had expected this battle to last minutes. Instead, it was dragging into hours. How are they doing this? He demanded. They are primitives. They should have been destroyed by now. His tactical officer had no answer. Below the battle, on the surface of Earth, billions watched their skies burn. Debris from destroyed ships streaked through the atmosphere like falling stars. Every few minutes, another explosion lit up the darkness. Priya stood in a bunker beneath Geneva, monitoring reports from every continent. The news was bad. Orbital platforms falling. Defense stations destroyed. Ships lost faster than they could be counted. But there was other news too. Hegemony ships crippled. Hegemony carriers retreating. Hegemony fighters scattered and confused. They're hurting, Amara said beside her. Really hurting. I don't think anyone has ever done this to them before. It's not enough, Priya replied. We're losing 3 ships for every one of theirs. We can't sustain this. No, but we can make them remember us. In space, Hiroshi's ship took a direct hit. Alarms screamed. Fire suppression systems failed. Half his bridge crew was dead. He kept fighting. His weapons officer launched another salvo of missiles. His pilot, bleeding from a head wound, maneuvered through debris fields to get them behind an enemy destroyer. They fired everything they had into its engines, and the alien ship went dark at 83 hegemony vessels. That was the count when it was over. 83 ships destroyed or disabled against 600. A terrible ratio for humanity. But for the hegemony, it was something far worse that it was the first time they had lost anything in 400 cycles. Overseer Dralith ordered his fleet to retreat. Not a full withdrawal, just a tactical repositioning. But everyone watching knew what it really was: hesitation. Hiroshi floated in his damaged bridge, surrounded by the bodies of his crew. The Unity was crippled, barely functional. But it was still there. He was still there. He opened a channel to Earth. "We held them," he said. "Not for long. Not for good. But we held them." On every screen, in every bunker, across every nation, humanity heard those words. They had fought gods and survived. But as Hiroshi watched the hegemony fleet regroup in the distance, he knew the truth. This was just the first wave. The next one would be prepared. The next one would be angry. And humanity had already spent most of what it had. "Enjoy the victory," he whispered to himself. "Tomorrow, they come back." 3 months of silence followed the first battle. The hegemony fleet sat at the edge of the solar system, watching, waiting, blocking any escape. Nothing came in. Nothing went out. Earth began to starve, not for food, not yet, but for hope. The victory high faded quickly when people realized that winning one battle meant nothing against an enemy with endless resources. Factories ran out of materials. Hospitals ran out of medicine. Cities ran out of power as fuel reserves dwindled. Priya spent her days managing crises. Rationing. Civil unrest. Political factions that demanded surrender. A man in Berlin shot 3 politicians who voted against giving up. A riot in Jakarta burned an entire district when food shipments were delayed. "We're falling apart," she told Amara during one of their late-night meetings. "Even if the hegemony never attacks again, they can just wait. In a year, maybe 2, we'll be begging them to take our tribute." Amara nodded grimly. "We're building underground. Bunkers, farms, manufacturing. If they invade, we can hold out for decades below the surface. Decades of living in tunnels. That's not victory. That's a slower death." Then the message came. It arrived through the same back channels Priya had used to contact the Baravi. But this time, it wasn't just the insectoid traders reaching out. There were others. Many others. The Dremathai came first. They were massive creatures, their bodies like great slugs wrapped in engineering harnesses. For 200 cycles, they had built the hegemony's stations and ships while paying tribute from the resources of their own world. "We watched your battle," the Dremathai representative said through the screen. "We have watched many battles. Corrections, as the hegemony calls them. But we have never seen a species fight like you did." "We lost," Priya said. "You survived. That is not losing. That is something new." Then came the Vilex, small avian creatures who served as scouts and messengers throughout hegemony space. They had eyes and ears everywhere, and they were tired of using them only to serve their masters. "Information is power," the Vilex representative chirped. "We can tell you where their fleets move, where their supply lines are weak, where their leaders sleep." Finally, the Baravi returned. The same representative Priya had spoken to before the battle. "You asked us to hope," the Baravi said. "We did not believe you then. But now, every tribute species in the galaxy is talking about Earth. About the humans who said no. About the fleet that bled." Priya felt something loosen in her chest. Hope. The thing she had been rationing as carefully as food and fuel. "What do you want from us?" she asked. "We want you to lead." The word hung in the air. Lead. Not just survive. Not just resist. Led a rebellion against the greatest power the galaxy had ever known. "If we do this," Priya said slowly, "there's no going back. The hegemony will never stop hunting us. They'll make an example of Earth so terrible that no species will ever dare resist again." "They will try," the Baravi agreed. "But they have never faced what we can build together. You have the will to fight. The Dremathai have technology. The Vilex have intelligence. We Baravi have ships and trade routes. Alone, each of us is nothing. Together, we might be something the hegemony has never seen." Priya thought about Earth. The burned cities. The mass graves. The children growing up in bunkers, never seeing the sun. She thought about the alternative. Surrender. Tribute. Watching her species become slaves while the rest of the galaxy remained silent. "What do you need from us?" she asked. "Right now? Just your symbol. The Baravi leaned forward. The hegemony rules through fear. For 400 cycles, every species has believed that resistance means death. You prove them wrong. If you stand, others will stand with you. We are proof of that. 3 days later, Priya announced the alliance. A coalition of 5 species united against the hegemony. It was tiny. It was weak. It was the most dangerous thing the galaxy had seen in centuries. In his command ship at the edge of the solar system, Overseer Dralith received the news. His crystalline form flickered with something that might have been anger. They are building a rebellion, his tactical officer reported. A rebellion of insects and slaves. Dralith's voice crackled like breaking ice. It will be crushed. The Corps has sent orders. They want this ended quickly, before it spreads. Dralith turned to the viewport. Beyond it, 3,000 ships were gathering. The full might of the hegemony armada. Inform the Corps, he said. Earth will be corrected, and this time, there will be nothing left to rebuild. The armada began to move. 3,000 stars fell toward Earth. That was how it looked from the surface. 3,000 points of light moving against the fixed sky, growing brighter with each passing hour. Children pointed at them and asked their parents what they were. Parents lied and said they were just satellites. Nobody wanted to explain that each light was a warship. Nobody wanted to admit that this time, there would be no miracle. Commander Hiroshi Tanaka stood in the rebuilt command center of the Unity. His ship had been patched together from salvage and prayer. Half its systems barely functioned. Its crew was a mix of veterans and volunteers who had never seen combat. Final count, he asked. 3,200 hegemony vessels, his tactical officer replied. We have 118 ships capable of combat operations. The numbers spoke for themselves. This was not a battle. This was an execution. But Hiroshi had known that when he put on his uniform this morning. Every person in his fleet had known it. They came anyway. Signal all units, he said. We fight until we can't. Make every shot count. Make every second matter. The first line of defense was the minefield. Millions of kilometers of space seeded with explosives, radiation bombs, and more of Yusuf's communication disruptors. The hegemony pushed through it like a giant wading through shallow water. Ships were lost, but barely noticed. The second line was the orbital stations. Massive platforms built in secret, crewed by men and women who had volunteered knowing they would never come home. They opened fire as the hegemony fleet passed, tearing into enemy ships with everything they had. The stations died one by one, but they died fighting. Each one took a dozen enemy vessels with them before their reactors went critical and they became new stars in the darkness. The third line was Earth itself. Every nation fired at once. Missiles launched from every continent, from submarines in every ocean, from aircraft that climbed until their engines froze. The sky turned white with exhaust trails. The hegemony shields held. Mostly, but some missiles got through. Some warships exploded. Some alien crews learned what it felt like to burn. On the surface, cities were already being evacuated. Billions streamed into underground shelters, hoping the rock and dirt above them would be enough. It wouldn't be. Everyone knew it wouldn't be. Priya watched from the Geneva bunker as reports flooded in. Stations destroyed. Cities burning. The fleet being torn apart ship by ship. We've done everything we can, Amara said beside her. It's not enough. No, but it was never going to be enough. We always knew that. In space, Hiroshi led what remained of the human fleet in one final charge. The Unity was burning, half its weapons gone, its hull cracked in a dozen places. But it was still moving. This is Commander Tanaka, he broadcast on all frequencies. To the hegemony, and to anyone else listening. We are not cattle. We are not tribute. We are humanity, and we do not kneel. His ship slammed into a hegemony destroyer. Both vessels exploded in a ball of light that was visible from Earth. Overseer Dralith watched from his command ship. The humans were broken. Their fleet was dust. Their planet was defenseless. Victory was absolute. Then his sensors screamed. Ships were jumping into the system. Hundreds of them. Coming from directions the hegemony hadn't bothered to watch because nothing lived there. Nothing was supposed to be there. Baravi freighters, their cargo holds filled with weapons instead of goods. Dremathai construction ships, their industrial arms converted into battering rams. Vilix fighters, small and fast, swarming like silver clouds. The coalition had come. What is this? Dralith demanded. His tactical officer had no answer. This wasn't supposed to happen. The tribute species were weak, obedient, broken. They didn't fight, except now they did. The coalition fleet crashed into the hegemony flank. They didn't have the numbers to win. They didn't have the technology. But they had something else. They had watched humanity stand alone against impossible odds. They had watched a tiny species from a tiny world tell the greatest power in the galaxy to go to hell. And they had decided that if Earth was going to burn, they would burn with it. All ships, engage the newcomers, Dralith ordered. Destroy them. But his fleet was now caught between two enemies. The human survivors on one side, fighting with the desperation of the doomed. The coalition on the other, fighting with the rage of the oppressed. For the first time in 400 cycles, the hegemony was losing. Not decisively. Not completely. They still had numbers. They still had power, but they were bleeding. And as Dralith watched another of his carriers explode, he understood something that chilled him to his crystalline core. This was no longer a correction. This was the beginning of a revolution. When the last hegemony ship retreated, no one cheered. There was nothing left to cheer about. Earth was a wounded world. Entire cities had been reduced to glass craters. Oceans boiled where debris had fallen. Radiation clouds drifted across continents that would be uninhabitable for decades. Billions were dead. The survivors crawled out of their bunkers into a world that barely resembled the one they had left, but they were alive. Against all odds, against all reason, humanity had survived. Priya emerged from the Geneva bunker into gray daylight. Ash fell like snow. The mountains in the distance were shrouded in smoke. Somewhere, a child was crying, and Aid handed her a communication device. Overseer Dralith is requesting contact. She almost laughed. Almost. But there was nothing funny about any of this. Put him through. The hologram flickered to life. Dralith looked different now. His crystalline form was dim, the light within it faded. He had watched his fleet get torn apart from two sides. He had watched the impossible happen. Ambassador Nair, he said, I am authorized to offer terms. Priya stared at him. This being had ordered the deaths of billions. He had commanded the destruction of her world. And now he wanted to negotiate. I'm listening. The hegemony will withdraw from your system. Earth will pay no tribute. Your species will be classified as protected, not cataloged. In exchange, you will cease all expansion beyond your solar system. You will remain in your system. Forever. It was a generous offer by hegemony standards. Safety. Peace. Survival. A cage made of stars. Priya thought about what humanity had sacrificed to get here. The ships that had charged into certain death. The soldiers who had fought knowing they would never see their families again. The commanders like Hiroshi who had given everything so that others might have a chance. No, she said. Dralitha's form flickered. You refuse. We didn't fight and die to become prisoners in our own solar system. We didn't bleed so that our children could spend their lives staring at walls they're not allowed to cross. Priya stepped closer to the hologram. You wanted to know what humans are, Overseer. Let me tell you. We're the species that crawled out of caves and reached for the moon. We split atoms. We cured plagues. We crossed oceans because we wanted to know what was on the other side. And when you told us to kneel, we built something to stand on instead. You cannot win a war against the hegemony. Maybe not. But we can make it too expensive for you to fight. We can inspire every tribute species in your empire to ask themselves why they're still paying. We can be the crack in your foundation that brings the whole thing down. She paused. Or you can leave us alone. Completely. No tribute. No restrictions. No cages. And we'll think about letting you survive the next few centuries. The hologram was silent for a long moment. This is not over, Dralith said. No. It's just beginning. The connection ended. 1 year later, Priya stood in a chamber that would have been impossible to imagine when she first received the hegemony's ultimatum. It was built on the moon, constructed by Dremathai engineers with materials supplied by Baravi traders and protected by Vilex early warning systems. Around her sat representatives from 30 species. All former tribute worlds. All now free. The Soul Alliance, they called it. A coalition born from defiance and forged in fire. We did not start this war, Priya said to the assembly. We did not ask for it. We did not want it. But we will finish it. Not with conquest. Not with tribute of our own. We will finish it by building something the hegemony never imagined. A galaxy where every species chooses its own path. where no one pays tribute to anyone, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. The chamber erupted in sounds that might have been applause if you translated them through a dozen different biologies. Far away, in the heart of hegemony space, Overseer Dralith watched a holographic map. Dots that had been blue for 400 cycles were turning red one by one. The rebellion was spreading that he had thought Earth would be an easy correction. A minor species on a minor world, dealt with and forgotten in a matter of days. Instead, they had started a fire that was consuming the galaxy. He understood now, too late, what humanity truly was. Not a threat to be corrected. A spark, and the hegemony had been dry kindling for centuries. On Earth, they were rebuilding. The cities would take generations to restore. The scars would never fully heal. But the survivors planted gardens in the ruins and raised children who knew that the stars were not a boundary, but a road. Humanity had chosen war. They had paid the price in blood and fire, and they had set the galaxy free.